Hello, everyone, and happy Thursday. I wanted to hop on here to talk about a post that I made that has over 1.2 million impressions on X. And that is talking about these SpaceX heat tiles, those tiles that all of you guys have been messaging me about, asking if I'm selling them, asking if you can get one. When the fact of the matter is, they weren't even my heat tiles. A friend found them, but this is not unusual for people to find fully intact heat tiles, chips of heat tiles. And so I wanted to dive a little bit deeper into this and bring in an expert so we can talk a little bit more about Starship's heat tiles. Remember, there's 18,000 of them on the Starship compared to maybe the shuttle space tiles. So let's bring in our guest, Scott Walter. And you've been talking about this a lot lately.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. I was on a podcast with Royden D'Souza the other day with Dr. Ed Pope, who has actually worked on the shuttle program and the heat tiles and knows a lot about thermal management on spacecraft. And we had a kind of a good discussion to understand what's going on with the heat tiles. Now, if we look behind you right now, I think that soundproofing you have, you see the pink tiles behind you, those
Yes.
are hexagonal shaped tiles.
Yes.
They might be roughly about the same size of the actual heat tiles. Maybe the tiles are a little bit bigger, but they're
Yeah.
hexagonal for a reason because they fit together. So obviously you can
Right.
make them square, but if you make them circles, then they don't fit together so well. So they're hexagonal for a reason. And I think
Right.
you may have
Right.
a couple that you found. And
Yes.
for those who need to know is that whenever you re-enter the atmosphere, there's a lot of heat that you've got to worry about managing. Otherwise, you will burn up. And whenever you see a meteorite or something like that, that's a rock that's coming through the atmosphere in many cases. Sometimes it might be ice, but in many cases, they will actually be metallic objects and they get so hot that they burn up there. And they're coming in at roughly the same velocity because you have a lot of friction. And of course, a lot of us know we rub our hands together really quickly. We're able to generate heat in our hands. And if you do this through the air, you say, well, I'm not getting much from the air, but you're going through at hypersonic velocities, you're generating a lot of heat, you're generating the plasma you're seeing, and it's got to go somewhere. And what's going to happen is going to go in the spacecraft. So you got to do something to get rid of that heat. And
Right.
there's a couple of ways. The way it was done in the Apollo era and Gemini and Mercury is they use what they call these ablative heat shields. And the whole idea is that they actually sacrificed themselves. They had a certain amount of insulation, but what they would do is when they got too hot, they would actually basically expose the next layer behind it. So they were allowing the heat to kind of be pulled away and pulled away. The problem with something that's ablative, almost by its name, it's like it's not reusable. You kind of, after a while, it's used up. Now, they are trying to work on some that you can maybe use a couple of times. I think like the Dragon capsule and stuff like that are doing the same sort of thing for their reentries. But everyone's always wanted to come up with like the perfect kind of thermal insulation that could be used again and again. And it doesn't have to be ablative. It doesn't melt or do anything like that. And that's what the shuttle program came up with. And that's what we can probably talk about right now. But I'll let you get a word in edgewise because, I just run on and on and on.
Yeah. Well, you also know a lot, which is why I reached out to you. But I just want to show I took some B roll or some videos
Mhm.
of the portions of the heat tiles that my friend found. He says that he walked and drove about 200 miles up and down the coast 3 days in a row. So one of these fully intact tiles that he found was actually almost 3 days after the launch, which was very
Mhm.
surprising to me. Luckily, he lives near the area, so he's able to do that. I think there were a lot more scavengers after the first one, but interesting as well. I weighed the tile and it's almost a pound. So that means you have, roughly 18,000 pounds on Starship of just the heat tiles. So
Yes.
and it's not even. So that's quite interesting too. But let me show you this insulation. This was a thicker piece that he found. One of them is, quite thin and it has like, it dips in, but there is, and he said that this red stuff might have been the epoxy.
It could be. Think what they have is they also have like a felt layer underneath it. So there are some images showing how it's mounted on there. And you'll notice that looks like it's a half section. So it might have been between the different seams. So when we look at it, okay, so there we go. We got a pretty good example of what it looks like is that it seems that the hexagonal pattern doesn't go all the way up there, that every now and then you'll see that there's straight sections. And that's probably about where the seams are where they weld everything together. And the attachment method is the issue, is like they work really well. If they stay on, the whole principle of these things is they are just absolutely great because they do not conduct heat very well at all. And they can also withstand a lot of heat. And they're a silica based kind of thing. So they're basically like glass. And of course, anyone knows one of the properties of glass is it's very brittle. It breaks very easy. So you can't make these in big sheets because they become so heavy, they break under their own weight. So you have to make them small enough that they don't break, but you like to make them big enough that you don't have to have too many of them on there. But at the same time, you can't make them too flat because remember, you're trying to cover a curved surface. So the trick is, how do you put them on? And you've got different thermal properties that the spacecraft is breathing. I mean, we see it breathe as it gets colder. And when that happens, it means you get expansion and contraction, everything on there. So you have to worry about the fact that you're going to get some relative motion between where the tile is and whatever the attachment surface is underneath. So the big question is, okay, do we do it with epoxy? Is that going to be one way? Do we glue it on? And is that going to work? Or do we use some kind of mechanical fasteners? And it seems like they've decided to go with this idea of mechanical fasteners. And it may be they're trying to do a couple of tricks here, that by epoxying it onto the felt, it will then be stuck on the felt. And maybe you do something to then get the felt to remain kind of attached on there. Because the one problem with these things is they are so brittle that even if you start drilling a hole in it, you can't get an even hole. It'll just start to shatter and fall apart into little pieces.
Right.
So it's the delicacy that's the problem. And these things are clearly shaking off. Now, when was the first tile found? Like within a day after launch?
So and actually he's commenting right now. I sent him the link. So if he's able to hop on, he'll hop on. But he says that tile that I weighed has actually gotten lighter too. It must have been waterlogged a little bit as well. But he searched, I think, 3 days in a row.
All right. So, and I think if I recall, you already showed a picture of it like the day after. I'm like, holy cow, they're already washing up.
Yeah.
And the fact that one was found so quickly within 1 day almost tells you there's got to be a lot out there. It wasn't like the only one that fell off.
There's the Big Daddy. That is a fully intact, like, what a find. I've had so many people message me. And in some ways, I'm like, why would I send this for free? Even if it was mine, why would I send it for free?
Yeah.
Also, if you're a real space fan, you would never sell it. You would keep it. I would keep it if it was mine.
Yeah. Now, it is amazing that, it's somewhat is, I think they do put some sort of covering on top of it. So underneath the substrate is this silica glass based stuff. And then they put a glazing on top of it that might actually give it a little bit of strength, because otherwise you would expect that thing would have shattered when it came down. Now it is very it is very light. So when it came down, it wasn't coming down a lot of velocity. It probably floated down and hit it. But do we see the others? We do have shattered pieces when they hit the surface. So it seems that if it comes off intact, it's going to be okay. The other problem is the vibrations that are going on. Remember, you're going to have a lot of relative motion, and you're going to have these neighbors that are going to be bumping up against each other. They're either going to push you off, or in some cases may actually cause you to fracture or crack. And probably once you get that first fracturing, then the whole thing starts to break apart. And that's why you're seeing a lot of those smaller fragments that are coming up. But again, when it comes down to the chances of finding one, if there's only one fell off, the chances of it being found are like practically zero.
Right.
Especially within 1 day. But when you start finding a lot, it tells you, oh, there must be a larger number of them still already out there, or that have washed up in different places, because the currents go all over the place.
Well,
that's an indication they came off at launch.
I had no idea that there were 18,000 per ship. Like that. I mean, like, for some reason, I thought it'd be lower, way lower. So that just shows you like the scale of the Starship, because I've seen it in person. I've looked at it from the ground, and I've felt, held a full heat tile, but there's still like this disconnect that there's 18 freaking thousand.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. Now I'm surprised that, if it's lost its weight, it shouldn't lose that much weight, because I'm really surprised it would absorb that much water. It should almost be like styrofoam, not allowing anything in there. But when you look at the backside, you'll see the 3 holes, which are designed for the fasteners to fit in. So they're probably like clips that go in there. And that thing is cast in that shape. It's not milled, because it's just so fragile. They just have to go ahead and cast it. So the holes are in there, and probably whatever it clips into is already in there when they cast it, because that's going to be really hard to pop in after the fact without actually causing damage, because of the fragility of everything. And of course, you can see those ribs that are there. They're trying to give it a certain amount of strength, but also keep it as light as possible. So
And
again, like 18,000 pounds is not something to sneeze at. I mean, that's a lot of mass that you would like to not have to carry around, but
now,
you need to
now
have it there.
let me ask you some questions because I was trying to do some research about this. It looks like, in terms of temperature that it can withstand, these Starship heat tiles might be slightly more than shuttle. At least what I read
It
online,
could
it was
be, could be.
2,300 Fahrenheit for shuttle and like 2,500 for Starship.
Yeah, yeah, and we shouldn't be surprised because it was originally sort of discovered back in the 70s that you had this material that was just amazing. You could have put a blowtorch on one side, and the other side is extremely cool. And part about the thermal properties of this thing is that it's a really, really bad conductor, and it also is really bad at retaining heat. So you get this idea of thermal mass. So if you have something when it gets very, very hot, it's really hard to get rid of it. So it may take a long time to warm something up, but when you warm it up, it's holding on to a lot of heat. And then eventually you want to get rid of that heat somewhere else. So if you can find something that has really poor conductive properties and is also really lousy at holding on to heat, that's great. So that's why they could heat those tiles up and they would be extremely hot. I mean, you could see them glowing and you could throw it in someone's hand and the person's hand's not burning. And why is that? It's because, well, it's temperature high, but the actual heat content is extremely low. It's almost like there's nothing in there. So it's sort of the same idea. You can go into a hot sauna, right? That can be, in some cases, actually at the boiling point of water and not scald yourself. But if you go in the same temperature of water, you are going to scald yourself. And that's because your body's thermal mass compared to the thermal mass of the air around you is so much more that the heat content that is in the air is not going to heat you up that much. Yes, you're sweating a little bit, but you're not going to go to the boiling point because you're able to absorb it very easy. And so that's what goes on here is that thing has such lousy thermal mass that the thing behind it has got so much thermal mass and it's so hard to heat up that when it comes in contact with whatever the temperature is that thing's going on there, there's nothing to absorb. There's no heat energy there. And the beauty about heat transfer, it has nothing to do with content. It has to do with temperature differential. So as soon as you get something at a high temperature and you get a high temperature over there, nothing wants to flow between it. Because that's the whole idea. Like with electricity, if you have a high voltage gap, you have a lot of current. But if your voltage goes down to zero, no current flows. It's the same thing with heat flow. If the temperature is the same, the heat stops flowing.
And you might have already said this, but remind me, what exactly is this made up of?
It's a type of silicate. So it's like glass. So that's part of the reason why it's very light. And it's almost like a fiberglass. So a lot of its material comes from the fact that it's very light. Obviously the more mass, that's why it's very light, because the heavier an object has, the more ability it has to also kind of retain heat. So that's almost a rule of thumb. If it's literally more massive, it will retain more heat. If it's very light, it's going to also hold very little heat.
Is it just silicate?
Oh, I think it's a combination of other things. So there's going to be a bunch of things. One is that not only what its constituency, but how it's actually manufactured or put together. So there's a couple things.
Is this the same material as Space Shuttle?
Similar. It's not identical, but it's very, very similar. So it has the same kind of properties in that you can heat it up and it won't, it won't transfer it in there. And it also is this very difficult, very delicate and difficult to maintain attachment. And that was like the problem with the shuttle program, is that they would always fall off. So they would lose hundreds per launch. And fortunately, in most cases, they were not in an area that would compromise it, except we know in one case, and that was the return of Columbia. So there's some parts of the structure that could withstand it, or because only a little bit of heat flux is coming in a small area, the rest of it kind of is able to compensate and draw some of the heat out from that area so it doesn't melt too much. And the problem with the shuttle program is that every tile was unique. There was no two tiles that were the same. So you had thousands, I think maybe tens of thousands of different tiles that would take a while to make. So, and they didn't know. It's like, well, which ones are going to fall off on this one? And it's like, okay, these are off. We have to go get those things. And it was a very delicate process to get in there and hold. So most people felt after the shuttle program, even though they managed it and they could get the whole thing to work, it was such a headache that they were just going, there must be a better way to be able to do this without, because the whole idea was quick turnaround. And I don't think the shuttle, it never came close to the promise of being like just a couple of weeks or almost a week between them.
Right.
They may have was easily several months between the launch of the same shuttle. I mean, there may be a few cases where there were like shuttle launches within 2 months of each other, but it wasn't the same orbiter. It was a different one. So there was a
Well,
long process of refurbishment and everything else. Yeah.
I do want to just quickly thank Bimmer Geezer, who you might remember. He was on the zero G flight with us. He says,
Mhm.
"Nice to see you, Dr. Walter, and happy birthday, Ellie. Thank you so much for this
Aha.
very generous super chat. My birthday is on Sunday, and I will be 32 years old." So
Okay. So last year was Baskin Robbins. Okay.
yeah, right,
Yeah.
right. 31 flavors. So almost 32. It's pretty crazy.
Mhm.
So we are getting some questions as well. Let me see. Someone says, hit the like button. Thank you for more cowbell. What about this from Ross? Do you know whether the reentry trajectory for Starship is likely to be steeper or shallower compared to shuttle?
There's probably going to be some similarities. And of course, we're not quite sure what it is. So the idea of the reentry model back here.
We have props, everyone.
Yeah. So we do have certain props. I don't have the heat tiles on here. This is the one that's like the all chrome one.
Yeah, I
Um,
have the baby
so
heat house.
if you look at the horizon that we have here, when you come in, you want to have some sort of angle of attack like this. And if you have a very shallow angle of attack, then what you might be doing is putting, you're going through and you're not bleeding off any energy, because then you're like a bullet. You're trying to go straight through and you're trying to minimize the amount of drag that you have on there. So you want to have a profile that gives you a little bit of an angle of attack, which is going to create a certain amount of uplift. And what that lift is going to do is, because it's sort of opposite direction that you're going there, will create also the effect of drag of trying to slow you down, as well as the drag in the vehicle. So typically when you produce lift, the more lift you produce, the more drag you end up producing, whether you want to or not. So that's also going to be good for slowing you down, but you don't want to have too much. If you get too much, you're going to tip on over. So the question is, with the Starship, it doesn't have fully formed wings like we're used to seeing on an aircraft. You want to minimize the control surfaces as much as possible, but you want to have enough that you have control authority. So if you get too steep of an angle, you may end up losing the control authority that you need to be able to pitch out. So you've got these two here, and the question right now is like, where was the center of gravity of the Starship? So we can assume when it launches and it's fully full, the center of gravity is probably pretty close to the center. It's probably back here a little bit, because you've got the mass here of the engines, which is definitely going to be more massive than the fuel tanks as far as from the density. So it's probably a little bit back from there. But as you start losing the fuel, man, it just starts dropping back further and further and further. And what that means, you get the situation that if you want to be able to rotate about that, you need to be able to create a good angle arm or lever arm to put you down here. Now, what you have up here is you have these lifting surfaces. And these lifting surfaces, you can do a couple of things with them. You can either make the lift vector go that way, or you can make the lift vector go that way. So if I need to pitch up, I create a little bit of lift here, and it's going to make it want to rotate that way. And then if I want to go down, I just do it. And so part of that is what you can do with the movement of those ailerons in one direction or another to try to change it. But it's a little bit different than you normally think of for an angle of attack. You're thinking of having these things kind of go backwards in this direction. And this way, they're just kind of flapping up and down. So it almost looks like you've got more control authority going this way, because you can imagine one lift. If I make one of them flat and one of them the other way, I can sort of change the lift on one side dramatically more than the other. And it becomes like an aileron on an aircraft. I can roll this way. So it seems like, oh, you get good control authority in going to that. But that's not the one that you really want the most on. You want to be able to control this for your angle of attack. And then this way here, I think they probably have the least amount of control authority with this particular setup you have. And that would be like the yawing that you're beginning to see here.
Right.
Be able to move that thing around. And remember, we were seeing it doing a lot of that. But that's not because they didn't have good control authority on the surfaces, because it was in orbit. There's no atmosphere up there. There's nothing for these things to bite into to do anything until you get to the reentry phase. So when it's up there, something was making it spin around. Now, something was, or maybe it was intentional. This is what we don't know. Because remember, we had a propellant transfer going on.
Yes.
From
right.
the oxygen header tank, which is up at the top, so all the way down here to the lower oxygen tank. So in other words, that's So we're moving it from here to there. Now, there's a couple of theories. Like one, everyone is thinking, well, were they rolling like this to get like some centripetal acceleration um, to help with the propellant transfer? And I don't see what that would do, because all that would do is like literally make the fluid that's in there climb the walls. Okay, so it's going to be like a centrifuge that you're used to seeing, that you spin it around, everything goes to the outer wall, and everything in the middle is not there. And that's not what you want. The idea is that you would love to have a gravitational field that just makes things go down this way. And but you say, well, you don't need gravity. That's what your pumps are for. It's like, well, yeah, ideally, but the problem is you need a sump or something like that to suck the fluid that you have into your pumps to be able to do them. And if your fluids are like only consuming half of your tank, so you've got the old problem here, like showing that is like, imagine your pump is up the top of this bottle, and all your fluid is there. There's nothing to suck in. You've got to do something to convince that fluid to get down to where you can actually begin to bring it out. So either use bladders or other things to kind of squeeze it in there, but if not, you've got to get something. So maybe you put it in a spinning configuration like this. So if you're doing something like that, you're going to force the fluid to move to the top here. And also the bottom part where you're pumping it down to, you're going to make it go the other way. So I'm not quite sure how they had the pumping mechanism set up, because it almost seemed like the fluid would want to go to the top of here if they were spinning it. So if you were seeing it doing this, that could have been when they were attempting to do the propellant transfer. Or if they were doing it this way, that would do the same thing. So if they were pitching, which I don't think they were, it didn't look like it was in a pitching orientation. It looked to me like they were getting more of this going on. And if you're doing that, yeah, you're going to create a small microgravity, and that might be all you need. It's not like you need a full G, just a little bit.
So pause 1 second. We have a special guest.
All right, great.
We have Nick, who has the heat tile here. So let me see if I can. Yeah. So how's it going?
Hello. Not too bad.
Hello, Nick.
Nice.
A lot.
Day today.
It is overcast, and a lot of people envy what you got.
So I think we got really lucky, honestly. We had a storm blow through right after the launch, so there wasn't many people out and about. So the storm and the high tides, if you don't have four-wheel drive, it keeps people most away from the back of the beach there.
So how many days, from when the launch happened, how soon did you search, and how many days did you go out there?
We were out 2 or 3 days in a row. And it was a couple of days after the launch too. I'd have to check the date of the photo of it. And it was the day before you ended up coming out. And I think like everything came in on that first tide after the storm. So I think we got lucky with everything blowing in. We found a lot of little bits, but only a handful of big tiles like that.
Oh, and what was your search area? Was it because you drove a lot, but I assume that was just back and forth and back and forth.
It's about 20 miles back and forth. So each trip, 20 miles.
Okay. Wow. Okay, and I thought you wrote 200 miles.
That's like cumulative. So we went
cumulative, yes,
repeatedly.
Wow. And so
you did that 10 times, yeah.
So we'll just, a lot of people are asking me if I'm going to sell them. Well, they're not mine. You're obviously not going to sell them, right?
So I am not going to sell my big prized pieces here. But I have a friend that found some as well. He just enjoyed the launch, being here and stuff. It's not anything that's a huge interest of him. He had mentioned selling it as well, but he wants to check into all of the proper legalities of it. So we've got all of the data from where we collected them, all the different locations where they were found. And a tile from the first launch, and I submitted all my information. They never got back to me on it, so I hope they used my information. But I do know they've contacted other people for the data and didn't request the tiles back either.
Right.
Okay. And was there a concentration of where you found the tiles, or were they really distributed evenly?
Concentration point. When the tide goes in and out here, especially with the storm blowing in, the wind kind of throws them to one specific area because the island has 2 cuts on either side for ship channels. So there's like a low point where the wind comes in to an angle where they all mostly go.
How far away were because you got 2 full ones, or was it just the one?
There's I'll have to count again. I don't know exactly what my friend found, but I have 3 fully intact tiles and then a cracked one. So I've got 4 total full tiles, all different shapes too.
And and how far apart would you say they were?
They were all at least a couple 100 feet apart from each other,
Oh,
even
Wow.
small little
close.
bits. There was a couple small piles of them and stuff like that, but for the most part, they were all a good distance apart.
And
Uh,
what was that distance actually from the launch site?
I just sent you the GPS coordinates to it. I haven't exactly mapped the distance of it out yet, but
Oh, so
it's
was it like, was these on the beaches of Boca Chica or on South
uh,
Padre Island?
South Padre itself.
Oh, South
Okay,
Padre. So that is okay.
So they
let
must
me
have
see.
fallen
And
out in the Gulf and then
yeah,
blown it.
yes, yeah, absolutely. Now, how obvious was it? Was it like just right there on the beach, or did you have to go in the seagrass or anything like that?
Um, the big tiles were right up on the beach. They seem to float pretty well when they stay
Mm,
intact like that. They don't take on too much water unless the tile's broken. They seemingly absorb a lot of water. It's lost more than
that's
20
interesting.
grams already.
Okay.
So I don't know if you guys can see this.
Yeah, yep. There's the GPS for it.
Okay, so right there, basically on the beach. So pretty much where
Yep,
the high tide would have brought it up, because the
exactly.
wind could have picked it up and also blown it a little bit, but evidently they're probably just heavy enough that the wind didn't make it go really far into the seagrass or places where it would be, very difficult to discover. So,
Yeah, no,
so
it was
was it
easy.
like you were really like sharp eyed looking for it, or you're driving around there and say, "Whoa,
So
look, I can see one. That's obvious."
I had a friend in town. We're building a safari park here. So I had a friend in town doing some small little electrical things and just helping me do some construction. And we were just going out and enjoying the beach. He came and he enjoyed the launch with us while he was here. He was like, "Oh, that's a perk. That's cool." He's like, "I forgot they do that down here."
Yeah.
Um, right. And we were just going around and I told my significant other to slam on the brakes. I think I found something cool. And I'm familiar with them and stuff and just saw the shape of it and just instantly knew. It was white side up, so it was black side down, but many were
Oh,
black
okay.
too.
Yeah.
The sea foam, sticks, debris, and there's a lot of beach litter from general
Yeah.
beachgoers,
Yeah.
fishermen, commercial waste as well. So we picked up a little bit of that too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now,
That's it's easy to be tricked by styrofoam.
have you looked after every single launch?
No, I looked after the first launch when I saw you and a couple other people post about it, and I found that first small piece. And that one I had to travel a decent distance as well, just for that one fragment. And that's the one that blew up, or and then
Right. And
so
that one you should have, yeah, there could have been a lot more. So
This is
I
what I
would
have.
assume you're right. The first one I would assume there would have been a lot at the launch, just because the rock tornado probably could have also, done some damage. So there would have been some that dropped right there very early. And then where it blew up over the Gulf was not that far out. And but it was a certain distance, and I was wondering whether it was going to be washing up all over the Gulf. And I'm on the other side. I'm over on the Florida side. And I was going out there all the time checking the beaches on my side, thinking it's like, oh, is that a piece of heat tile? And I go running up there, it's like, oh, no, it's just beach litter. It's just some styrofoam. So it hasn't made it over to, let's say, this side. It seems like the concentration
Right.
stays there. The other thing we want to point out is that those are clearly tiles coming right from the launch and a little bit
Right.
after the launch. They are not
Right.
coming from the reentry. Any tiles that could possibly be discovered after reentry are going to be in the Indian Ocean. It's going to,
Right.
it's literally half a world away. So,
So
so we
so
know
let's
this is not at all to do with reentry. It's everything to do with launch.
yes, so hold on. Let's see what we have here. We have a weight of
yeah,
you want to read that?
346.9.
Okay, cool. And it was that was about the same as when I was there, right?
It was 381. So it's lost a
Okay.
significant amount of water weight, is what I would call it.
So
I don't know if
I
I
just
turn my
yeah,
camera around.
I just want to make 2 points because during the first launch, Joe Tagmeyer found half of a full heat tile. SpaceX did reach out to him, and all they really wanted was the location. So a lot of people are asking, like, what's going on? Is that legal? I had someone say the FBI is going to come knocking on my door, which has not happened yet. But I think they just want to know the location. And I want to know from you, Nick, compared to after the first launch and this third launch, would you say that there were more or less, scavenger finds?
Um, I, I like looked around and stuff, and I saw a couple other people finding them and stuff. Different areas, mostly towards Boca Chica and Mexico. One other person said they found one on South Padre, but I'm not too entirely sure. I think it's still a little early to tell. I think a lot of people kind of just hold on to them and wait to see what stuff.
Right, right. Well, you guys, I have, this. This is a little chip, so I'll sell this for $5,000. I'm kidding. I know no one wants that. But it is cool. It's very cool to have in your collection. And, I know you for animals, but you're a huge SpaceX fan. And so, this is a fun activity too. I think if people are in the area, they can look themselves. Like the people that have been asking me, they're like, how do I get one? I'm like, go and scavenge right after. You just got to do the work.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And I think regarding the whether it's your property or not, I'm not quite sure what the laws of salvage at sea or something like that. There are some arcane laws about that. But I think with the shuttle, it was pretty clear because it belonged to the country. It didn't, no one could take any pieces. And that's why the government could ask it
Yeah.
back. And that's when the FBI or whoever was going to knock on your door, because you really were required to do it. Because this is a private company, it's probably something very different. And they could just waive their rights. I mean, they're just saying, we don't really care, because they probably say there's no engineering value to them. I would think they would want to bring it back to get an idea, maybe how they're, but they probably already know enough. It's like, doesn't matter. We just kind of want an idea of where they are. So maybe we can guesstimate how many of them actually fell off to get an idea of how good the attachment method is working.
Yeah.
Or let's say how poorly it is in this case.
You want to hold it up one more time and give us a little show? So that is tile number 9, it looks like. And you have a very clear serial number on the back of that as well.
Let me orientate it properly.
Awesome. Yeah, that is so cool. I'm
So
so
that
jealous.
lettering was on there already. That's not anything you put on?
Correct.
In the front and the back?
The only thing I did was give it a light spray with some water to wash the windblown jellyfish and the sand algae off of it that washes up in the sea foam as well.
Well, you guys, we have almost 1,000 people watching right now. And so I'm telling you, there's a lot of interest in these heat tiles. Like I said, I made that post on X and it has 1.2 million impressions. So sorry for stealing your photos, but people are really interested in this.
Yeah, it's definitely super interesting. It was a real cool find too. We all got excited. After we did find it, we did keep a sharp eye out for them and cruise up and down the beach a little more.
Now, there's one thing, actually, one of the SpaceX workers that works on manually, installing those heat tiles commented on my post and said, you really should wear gloves. And obviously, we both haven't. Have you had any issues with your hands since handling them much more than I have?
I have not myself, but I can see how they're incredibly sharp like that. A friend of mine said one gave him a little poke, and it didn't cause any issue or anything like that. He said it was no different than if a shell at the beach poked you. Stung for a second and then was fine afterwards. I have been just very cautious. I work with a lot of animals that can be dangerous. A lot of venomous and stuff like that, or large hoof stock. So I'm usually overly cautious. So I haven't been tossing them around or anything like that. I washed them, set them to dry, and then I just set them in a box for storage in a shelf. So
yeah.
Part of the reason is they might be like fiberglass. And if you've ever dealt with fiberglass insulation, if you don't work it with hands or anything like that, after a while, it kind of gets in, you just start getting all itchy. So it may be more of a concern like that than anything else.
Yeah,
so
how it being silicate, I'm familiar with other silicate products, and it does seem like some kind of expanded micro something like silicate. So it's got a very glassy, rough texture to it.
And I just want to ask, people watching in the audience, over 1,000 of you, if you have any questions for Nick here on the bottom, he's the one who found many heat tiles, including chunks of heat tiles. And so if you have any questions for him, ask them now. I do want to know, what time of the day did you find the full ones?
It was probably about 3:30, maybe 4.
Okay. Interesting.
So there was a lot of people. It was probably maybe 30, 40 feet next to people. Hundreds of people probably walked past it. People riding horses walked past it.
Huh.
And
Wow.
Because you said you saw hoof prints, right?
yeah, there was hoof prints by it. We're kind of lucky it didn't get smoked by.
Hmm. I
Oh
wonder
my.
if that's why some of the others are broken.
Definitely, we saw some road casualty pieces where other people driving had hidden them stuff, and they broken up. We did pick up some of the smaller fragments of them and stuff.
So maybe they really all did. They didn't break up on landing
Yeah.
in the ocean, and
Oh,
they broke up later on.
yeah, we
Yeah.
didn't find a single one floating in the water actively. So they were
Mhm.
all on the tide line.
Okay. Oh, okay. So none of yeah, that would make sense. That's so cool. I'm so jealous.
You'll have to
Next
come.
time, yeah, next time I'm gonna stay in town because you offered. You were like, "Hey, we're gonna go back out again," and I'm like, "Nah, there won't be any." I was wrong.
Yeah, we got pretty lucky on it. So we didn't really see anybody else going up and down this area. So at the time we were going, so it was
Yeah.
almost a little cruise on the beach.
Did they find any after the second launch? Because I know that the first launch there was a lot, but
When I
second
looked
launch?
online, I saw people selling from the second launch.
Okay, so they came off also. Yeah.
I didn't
Well,
actually
I
see anybody that I knew post about it.
Yeah, I searched a bit after the second launch. I obviously didn't find anything. So the first launch and I think the third launch, I really wish that we had a way to know how many total of the 18,000 actually, in both places fell off.
Yeah, from the video, from what's in view of the camera and stuff, it looked like seemingly a lot stayed on.
Yeah. Yeah. I was looking, I was trying to figure out, is it like one or two they're missing? It was kind of hard to tell because they don't necessarily cover everything. There's always a couple exposed areas for other reasons. So that means whatever was not in the view of the camera, it was definitely coming off.
So
And then
we
there
do
was
have a question for you. He said, Heat Shield says, I don't have any flown material. Can I talk with your friend Nick, who might be interested in making a deal for one?
Yeah, absolutely.
Maybe should I have them like email you or DM you on your Instagram?
Be on Instagram or Facebook.
Okay, so Instagram for Nick. You're about to blow up. Is indicator species correct?
Like a frog.
Yes. So actually, I'll just make a plug for you. I've been to, I think, your place 3 times now, and you have a fragile animal wildlife park. That's another great thing to do if you're in the area for a launch. A lot of people ask me, okay, aside from going to Starbase, what do I do with my family? Okay, maybe you go to the beach too, whatever, but you're not far away at all, and you have a ton of, animals for education and rehabilitation. So it's a great option.
Yep. We're slowly opening a safari park and zoo here in Los Fresnos. We're about 18 miles off the island.
Yeah, that's awesome. I highly recommend going there. And you're so nice. And you're a SpaceX fan, which is so cool that it's in your backyard.
You never know, I might put one of the tiles on exhibit 2.
Oh, that would be so cool. Well, now SpaceX fans have to go. Everyone wants a picture with the tile. They go viral.
Build an otter exhibit outdoors soon. I want to call it Otter Space.
Oh my God. So tell me, you also said that you felt the launch from where you were?
Yeah, so I didn't actually. I was at the one of the viewpoints along a highway for each launch, but I have staff here, and they said they were able to hear and feel the rumbling for the first 2. This last one with all the fog and cloud coverage, they said they didn't hear or notice too
Yeah.
much,
Yep.
but just a little bit still.
It was the same for me on the roof, like 6 miles away. I didn't even hear the sonic booms on this one, and the whole launch was much quieter. I think it was just so windy. They weren't sure if they were going to be able to launch on Pi Day. So, darn, it sucks not to hear the sonic booms, but I'd rather see the launch than hear it, as Scott and I know, because we tried to watch a Falcon Heavy and it was super early in the morning and we got fogged out. And so we heard
Mhm.
it, but God, that was devastating.
I mean, to believe that we were 3 miles away and the fog was so thick that even a Falcon Heavy couldn't cut it. I thought for sure that when it launched, we would see an orange glow through the fog, and you couldn't. And
No.
and then again, we didn't know if it launched because we were far enough away that it takes 15, 20 seconds before the sound gets to you. So we
Yeah.
weren't sure what was going on. Like, where's the glow? Where's the sound? And when the sound came, it was a little bit muffled, at that point, because that's what the fog will do, is it will absorb the sound, which is why you probably weren't quite getting it. And but what will be interesting though is if they get another perfect day launch, whether it sounds as loud as it did the second time when you're there, Ellie, because
Yeah.
if it's not as loud, that means they're doing something different with, in many ways, excess sound like that means that there is a certain amount of inefficiency or something that's creating it. But if it's not as loud as it was, it means, wow, they may have been able to tune something in the system to
I was
actually make it
thinking that.
quieter.
Yeah.
Yes. But we won't know until we actually get kind of the similar kind of conditions. Because I thought the wind was kind of blowing towards South Padre Island, and you wouldn't think that would be taking the sound away from you. Almost like it should have been drawing it towards you.
Right, right. Well, I know that you have a lot of animals to care for. So I'm guessing you'll be looking after the fourth launch as well.
Yes, I will.
Okay. Well, if I'm in town and I get to see it, I definitely want to join because I need my own full tile. I mean, obviously, I actually don't want the tiles to keep falling off because that's not what we want, but selfishly, I would love to find a tile, as we all would in the chat.
Somebody post a like 4K slow motion video. It was somebody you interviewed as well, Ellie, and I have to look. Maybe it's the Everyday Astronaut.
Everyday Astronaut, yeah.
And if you
Sounds
watch
right.
the video where they zoom in on the heat diamonds and the bottom of the booster versus the Starship itself, you can see just a couple heat tiles fall off.
Let me see if I can pull that up.
Yep. And if you freeze frame it, I almost swear some of them are the exact shaped ones I found, because some of them aren't just perfectly hexagonal. I don't know how to say that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hexagonal. Some of them are a little more diamond shaped too.
So is it near the beginning, by the way, that I should be looking for? Is it near the beginning of the video with the tiles?
I think it's the video where it's them standing on the beach with the zoom scope or the tracking scope.
Okay.
And then it zooms out into their lens versus the picture of them. So it's two people standing next to the camera.
Okay. I'm going to try to find it. That would be really cool. I guess I haven't seen that. But yeah, I got to interview Everyday Astronaut while I was there too. So that was pretty cool. Have you had anyone reach out to you about the tiles, or have they just gone viral on my page?
Not from their organization themselves, but some news places stuff had asked questions and things like that. But.
Really? Okay. That's pretty cool. Okay. I might need to queue this up in a little bit. I don't see them in the video.
Let me send you screenshots real quick.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. That would be awesome.
Send them on Instagram real fast. So I'm just probably disappear for a second.
Okay. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, this is like a pretty hot topic.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Now, well, it's interesting from the shape of the tile, because I think the majority of them are going to be hexagonal because that's covering the cylindrical part. So this part up here, and with occasionally some of them kind of half cut.
Don't do that.
Then when you get, and then when you get to the tip, the conical section, then
I'm sorry.
Then you're going to get weird shaped tiles to be able to cover that. And so if you're getting those, so the ones in the tip, I think might have a slightly different shape. And so if you're getting those, then that's telling us where they're coming from. And then if it's coming from the other side, then we know there's a lot that are going along the cylindrical part of the booster of the Starship. So that gives us an indication. I would expect that towards the front, they might be getting a lot, because that's where you're going to be getting most of the aerodynamic loading to begin with.
Yeah.
But if you're getting like an even distribution through it, then it's just from the shaking and the vibration. The fact that these things are just like that, and they're just falling off as a result.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Sorry. That was kind of funny.
A couple screenshots and the video from their TikTok.
Oh, you found the video. Is it on Instagram that you sent me?
Yeah. Yes, on Instagram.
Why don't I see it yet?
Let me triple check.
This is what happens when we go live. Maybe you sent it on TikTok. Let me see, actually. Now we have a bunch of tip jokes. Well, let's
Yeah,
take a
I'm
look
sure.
at that re-entry. This is the plasma field. Let me see if I can find that message. Okay, I'm not seeing it yet.
It might take a second to load.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
and a little bit earlier, before you get the reentry there, when they first start exercising those flaps, you see a lot of debris going by, and there's a big question of
Yeah.
what that debris is and whether that debris was tiles, ice, or something else. They didn't quite look like tiles because they didn't quite
It
have the
looked like,
right shape or consistency.
I can't tell if it's from manufacturing. I'm just trying to get the reflection.
Mhm.
There, you can see the grooves.
Yeah,
So they're very inconsistent in size. It almost looks like the ice or air grooved it.
Okay, I should be able to play the TikTok. I just uploaded it, so let's see if I can. Okay.
okay.
Yeah, it's
Seeing stuff coming off, it's hard to tell if it's just ice.
I, okay, I like that music. Okay, now I'm gonna mute it, and we're gonna try to see if we. Oh, it looked like there was just.
yeah. Try freeze frame it, and you'll see them go by.
I swear, I thought I just saw one. Oh. Pretty incredible video, though. Holy sh! It's mostly in this one, right?
Yeah, that first segment.
I'm trying to go slow. Maybe I just need to play it. Okay. Just gonna go. Oh, there's one.
Yep. See it on the left of the booster, the burners.
Yes.
Oh, I see something. Yeah, something dark there. Yeah.
That is it. That is it.
Maybe that's
Yeah,
number 9.
yeah, if you
Ah,
could zoom in, yeah, and be able to tell.
yeah.
Maybe. You never know.
I think this is as zoomed as they can get. It's
Yeah.
pretty
It'd be interesting to
phenomenal.
go, well, maybe, the AI can go in and do whatever that stuff that the forensics guys do, and we'll be
Yeah.
able to see that's exactly number 9. Is
Well,
there a frame before that, or is it just only in one frame?
There's
Probably moving so quickly.
I sent you, I think, 3 screenshots of that I
yeah.
saw.
Yeah, I have a little trouble sharing the photos. That's why I haven't pulled them up. Let's
I
see.
don't
Oh,
have the best internet right now.
yeah, no worries. I think just seeing your heat tile again is pretty cool. And I don't want to keep you too long. So maybe we'll just do one more look at it. Show it off one more time. Actually, I'm gonna put it on you. Okay, so number 9. Now, do you have the numbers of the other tiles?
Yes. I can go grab them real quick too.
Yeah, what are they? Yeah, go grab them, please.
Be right back.
Please. I have to say
It's,
please.
it's kind of weird that there's 18,000 of it, that it would just be number 9.
Yeah.
I almost wonder if there's different shape tiles, and that's like, this is the number 9 shape.
And number 9, Mambo number 9, that would be what, maybe near the bottom?
Well, I mean, so you think if you're going on up, that would be the lowest ring. Now
Yeah,
that's
right.
yeah. So yeah, if the others, I would expect the others would have very, very high numbers, or it may absolutely have nothing to do with the actual count.
We're being asked how much does it weigh? It's what, 13 ounces or so?
It was 340 something grams. I'm not sure that conversion right now. So
Yeah, a little less than a pound. Okay.
That's a half one, but is there a number on that one?
Not a handwritten number, just the X marks the spot and the serial number.
Mhm.
So what are those X's? Does anyone know?
I am not sure, but it almost looks like where you would place another X for whatever was the
Hmm.
most by one.
That's
Or is it
possible.
just
Yeah.
Elon? Is it Elon branding, formerly known
Yeah.
as Twitter X?
Yeah. Who knows? Okay. So that one you'll notice is very narrow compared to the other. So that is a
Yeah.
different shape.
Yeah, and it's so thick. And what number is that?
There's no
Uh,
number.
No number. Okay. Well, there's the really nice serial number. Damn.
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
not a number on the front of this.
How many screenshots are being taken right now?
I want to try. I'm not great with computers, but I want to do a diagram of the Starship and find out where their individual placements were.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
an interesting shape.
Row 26 at least. We know that much. And this one's got a little
Oh.
tooth. Oh, wrong side. Dyslexia. Tooth bite in it.
So row 26, tile number 9. I mean, these would all be maybe near the bottom.
Unless they're counting from the top and going down, because I'm wondering about that shape, whether that's something that would be going near the flaps. So maybe
Yeah.
26 rows up, and then you start to get near the lower flaps.
It's very interesting. And
That's possible. Yeah.
you have so many. You need to like get a save.
Yeah. That notch out there is rather interesting. I wouldn't expect it to be in the more open areas of the vehicle. You'd be expecting it's going to have to be somewhere around here where it's trying to fit in, maybe right along here or some other odd notched out surface here.
Wow. Let's see that one. Wow. Okay, so that is so interesting. Wow.
This
Damn,
is
dude.
one too.
That's the largest one?
Yeah, it's a little bit bigger than the normal. There we go. Hex.
Oh, okay. That's so Ross makes a guess that odd shaped tile is next to the flaps, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's a good guess. I would guess. Yeah.
For some reason why that is
If not near
so
the flaps, something else that sticks out like a COPV or, reaction control system, just some plumbing or something that just happens to be going through there. That would be the only other reason for having an odd shape.
yeah. Michael Maxey says X marks the top of the tile, so hard to
Yeah,
tell.
could be this side up. I mean, it seems like everything should be symmetric, so it almost shouldn't matter where everything
Right.
goes, but it sort of does because there's at least the symmetry is like every 120 degrees because you've got 3 of those spikes that are going in there to hold it. So there's probably just 3 different positions you can put it in, and depending upon where the shape of the booster goes, like if you get up towards the top, the shape is changing in such a way that there is like sort of a favored side up that you would just want to be able to get maybe a quick reference on to know. And it's hard to tell from the outside. It's like, whoa, wait a minute, which is it? And looking back, and then okay, that's where it's going to go.
Yeah.
Now
More
those
tile.
fasteners there's something else. They have to be in the right location. There's no doubt about it, because you see, they have to line up perfectly with the back of those things. And if they're off a little bit, then that means when they go in there, they're putting excess stress on the tile, and that's the reason why a tile could either pop off or shatter. But we see in this case, they're not shattering.
Yeah.
I mean, they're falling off, which is a big difference. The expectation is that something was going to happen that was going to cause them to shatter, but it looks like for some reason the fasteners are not clipping in exactly the way you'd expect to. And it would be nice to look at one of those things to see whether because there was no fastener in there. It was very clear there was nothing in there, and I wonder. When the fastener goes in, so you've got the part that it clips into, but you don't have anything sticking out. So something caused that to unclip from there, and to unclip without pulling that whole thing out. And
Right.
or did it kind of come off the booster itself? But there's a weld there. I mean, that's going to be really strong. I'd be really surprised if something like that came off. And if it did come off, it should remain intact on the tile. And so when you pick it up, you can say, "Oh, here it is." There was a bad weld. It's interesting why those things are coming off if they're not shattering.
Would think like a vibration issue or something. That vibrations cause things to unthread and unscrew.
But the thing is, you should be able to compensate for it. That's why you have Loctite and all these other things. So
Yep.
You know, and the thing is, if it's clipping in, it's like a one directional thing, is it? It clips in and that's it. And there's like, you can't pull it out anymore once it's clipped in. So you think they'd be able to come up with something that should be able to survive a vibration. But, you know, maybe they're realizing there's other modes of vibration that just go ahead and do that. But I'd be surprised, man.
So wait, what were you saying, Nick? It got clipped off a little bit.
I said how sometimes they can compensate for doing reverse threads. So the vibrations can cause things to tighten instead of loosen.
Yeah.
But like
Yeah.
what you're saying, it could be some type of pop and clip. It may be a expansion issue. Maybe the metal that clips it or whatever it is shrinks at some point or another, and then it lets the tile fall off. Because there's no scratches or damage to the little metal parts inside the tile.
Yeah.
There's a mystery there on how it could be detaching so easily
Yeah, right.
without actually destroying. And
Someone wants to know where these tiles are manufactured, and then Tin Man says it's called the bakery. Is that on site at Starbase?
that's actually in Kennedy, I believe.
Okay, so I've actually driven near there. Okay, so interesting.
Yeah, and I think have to confirm it, but I think it's like close to like $1.5 billion that has gone into the bakery to be able to make these things. So they spent a lot of money on setting up the production of these tiles.
Well, someone was like, SpaceX should just sell these tiles and a bunch of people would buy them. And it's like, how much does each tile cost to manufacture?
Good question. It's not made out of any exotic material.
No, silica is one of the most prevalent substances.
Yeah.
Everything.
Just go out to the beach. Get a lot of it there. So I would think it depends upon like the purity or anything else they have. So I don't think there's much of the component costs. They have these big autoclaves and ovens for being able to do it, but you know, that's sunken cost that they have right there. Once they have it, I would think once they get going, they're just casting it in these different molds. They could probably crank them out. And I mean, think about it, is they probably have some quality control going on of which ones are actually good enough to go in and which ones not. The ones that aren't good enough, just sell them. People will buy them. So you're not really throwing anything away at that point.
They should totally like give us the, the bad ones.
Yes.
Thank you for the super chat from Friday Ray. He calls them cyber tiles. And I think there was another super chat here. Michael Maxey wants to know, will Starship require larger control flaps or an entry burn to help slow down for atmosphere interface? Scott would know.
So I think the flaps are being used. So I think that's going to be the big question is, are the control flaps the right size? And the assumption is they've done all the math and engineering in there, and they're probably pretty confident it's what they need. Yeah. That's the engineering data they were trying to get.
Is about to die too.
Oh, okay. You're free to leave. We really appreciate you coming on here and sharing your experience. And, I mean, I guess other people can do this as well. It's really just a matter of looking on the beach.
Yep.
But you should.
The beach access will give you a garbage bag as well, so you're able to pick up a little bit of litter and stuff while you're out and about. The beach always appreciates it.
Yeah. Well, you should definitely put them on display. That'd be awesome.
Absolutely.
And people can go check out it's Fragile Animal Wildlife Park, correct?
Fragile Planet Wildlife Park.
Fragile Planet. Oh, I almost got it. Wildlife Park. And you've made
almost called Fragile Tiles.
Yes.
Definitely. Yeah, I can definitely see how they break up too. They sound like just like porcelain almost.
Yeah. Put your fingers, hold it up and finger tap it, fingernail it.
ASMR.
We need to make a song with that as an accessory instrument.
Well, here's a crazy idea. If I assume you have some pavers or something like that you could set up for a pathway somewhere, maybe you get some hexagonal pavers about the right size or kind of make a pattern. Of course, protect those things. Oh, there's some sort of plexiglass or something, but you can almost make it part of a walkway where people go.
Yeah, that's a good idea too. Making all the walkways, the paver shapes like this too.
Yep. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Well, you might have enough you might keep just finding more. You have a lot. Awesome. Okay. Well, you're good to go, Nick. And Scott and I will wrap up. Thank you for joining us.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye. So yeah, I'm surprised that we have over 1,200 people really interested in this. And I just think it's kind of one of those, unicorn finds that everyone would like to see up close. And it's a really interesting part of, the Starship that a lot of people can see from a distance, but don't typically get to see that close.
Yes, yes, and I mean, just to finish the thought, and the other on the control surfaces, assuming they're the right size, it's trying to do the entire reentry without a burn. So if you can just let the atmosphere slow you down, that's going to be to your benefit, and the only burn they should have will be the landing burn. So,
So,
so
so
that's my expectation. There won't be any reentry burn like there is for the Falcon booster, because the Falcon's a different shape. It doesn't have the heat shielding and everything else. Doesn't have, it's not really able to go down on its belly on reentry, because it's made out of aluminum, which will melt really easily, and doesn't have the heating. So with the heat tiles, you should be able to slow yourself down enough, and then do the control where it's doing the belly flop down to slow down, and then the last landing burn to bring it down. Because the
so what
less
is
fuel you have to burn, the better.
what do you know the answer to this question? What is the dry mass of Starship? 10 tons of heat shielding might not be a lot in comparison.
Yeah. The dry mass, is it like in the order of 100, over 100 tons or something like that? I think it's somewhere around the 100 tons with the tiles. So that could be
Okay.
close to 10%. And so it doesn't seem
Wow.
like very much, but yeah, just a second, to give you that is made out of stainless steel. And so if we all think about any sort of stainless steel plate that we have around there, we just imagine that stainless steel plate is like extremely rugged and very, very tough. And it definitely is. It has a lot of strength and will have a lot of mass, but it's not very thick in the scheme of things. I think it's about 4 millimeters thick. So it's like, okay, 4 millimeters, it's about like that. But if you were to take the Starship and shrink it down to the size of a Coke can, the thickness at that point would be, I think it's like almost 5 or 10 times thinner than the aluminum that you see in your can. So it's
Okay.
really, really thin. Uh,
So,
and so while in mass, it weighs a lot, they're trying to keep it as thin as possible to keep the mass down. So you're throwing on another 10,000 pounds or 10 tons in mass right there. Then you are already, it's like, well, that's less payload you can get. So if you can come up
so
with some magic surface, I mean, it'd be great if there was just something you could paint on there that didn't weigh a
yeah,
whole lot. But the reality is you need some kind of good heat tiling. And for
right, right,
me, this has been great, Ellie, because I hadn't really seen those tiles up close, and to realize that so many of them came back intact. And if
right,
that's the
right.
case, that there is something wrong with the fast. It maybe if there's nothing wrong with the tiles, there's just the method of affixing them. So they're not
Well,
shattering. It means they may be surviving these
right.
stresses a lot better than we thought. It's just the attachment method.
Yeah, totally. I'm gonna have two more questions. Jason wants to know where there will there ever be the possibility of a single piece heat shield jacket, 3D printed or a coating that gives sufficient protection?
I mean, that would be the dream. So it'd be great if you could just spray something on there. I'm not sure if you could, but the day before yesterday, I had a chance to meet Dr. Ed Pope, who works for a company called Matec, and they make these heat resistant surfaces out of, I think it's carbon zirconium oxycarbonate or something like that. It's a really weird kind of material that can take a lot of heat, and it also is very much like those tiles that it can take extreme amount of heat on one side and very little of it makes it to the outside. But the thing about it is it's very strong. It's structural. It's way more resistant than these tiles. They're not fragile. They're not shatter. While you could not make the spacecraft out of them, you could definitely wrap it, and you could wrap it in big sheets exactly like that. And you could probably make your control surfaces almost exclusively out of it. So rather than saying, oh, we're going to have these stainless steel control surfaces that we have to cover with the tiles so that they don't burn up, you might just be able to make it completely out of this material and save a little bit of mass because it has enough rigidity that you need for that. Probably not for everything else, but still it's pretty strong.
Mhm.
And
Right.
it's not quite as brittle, and it'd be a lot easier to attach, because if you can make it like one big shape, it's probably really easy to attach because you just like, make it the shape that it almost like pops right on and stays in place.
So that leads to my last question because, I want to wrap it up a little bit, but this has been great. My last question is if you could give SpaceX, some advice from everything that you've observed, you've really been
Mhm.
talking about and studying these heat tiles, what would you tell them maybe about material or how they were
I
fixed?
Yeah, the first thing is I would look into that material and other materials because this material is a fairly recent material in the past like 20 years. And what they're doing here is they're using material science that goes back 50 to 60 years. And material science has moved ahead and come up with a lot more new kind of materials to really start investigating them and see if there's possibilities. And it may be that there's some areas that this is perfect on there and others that they could go over to that. Now, as far as like, let's say that turns out that this is just, it's not going to be the way they have to completely rethink the whole process now. In that case, it's not like it sets the program back because you can still launch all these things. Remember, the Super Heavy booster doesn't have any heat tiles on it. There's no problem with that. So you can continue to do that. You can still use it in expendable mode. And you'll still be pretty useful. And if the expendable mode means we don't have to put the tiles on there and we don't have to put the fins on it, that means we can put even more launch mass up there. So what it means is it becomes as efficient as a Falcon 9 or a Falcon Heavy or maybe even more until you're able to solve this problem. So I don't think it's like a crisis in there. The question is, I mean, because when you see those shattered ones there, the assumption was, oh, those things just broke up and that's why they fell off. And it may turn out that no, they were stepped on by horses or cars that were going down the beach. Because if you're finding a lot of them that are in place, and again, I was expecting to see like big holes in the back there where those
Right.
holes were that it would be like ripped right out. And it's like, well, wait a minute, it's not ripped out. So they need to talk to Sandy Monroe. He like knows about fasteners. That's
Yeah.
that would be my recommendation is talk to Sandy. He'll figure out how to put it on there.
Someone asked me to send this to Sandy, and I'm like, would that even be of much value?
That picture. I mean, just that picture
No,
alone,
no, no,
sending it to Sandy.
this.
That yeah, I mean, that would be something else. So he would be able to tell a little bit, but he's going to be more interested in the holes in the back and what's in there to see how they're doing it. And he'd probably be able to tell he might look at it and say, yes, there was absolutely no point of failure there. It's just for some reason the fasteners slipped off. And why
Mm,
did they slip off? And
right.
it may be that it could be that the design is right, but the process of putting them in, there's just something wrong that they're either not going in the right orientation or you think about it, you're really blind when you're putting it in there. You're just kind of like popping it in and you're hoping everything kind of meets in and goes right. And it could be that they are just not really snapping in all the way. So they need to come up with something which is literally foolproof and very easy to pop in place. That could be part of the problem is that they believe they're fixed really well, but there's some flaw in the process of getting them attached.
Right. And they're all by hand, right? They're all by hand.
I think they're putting them all up here. Now, the attachment points that are going in there of those fasteners, those pins, those are being done robotically. And we've seen the equipment that does that. That was in Tim Dodd's video from about, was it 3 years ago or more? And I did like a forensic analysis of that to figure out which robots they were using and how they were actually doing it. So
Oh my
they're
God.
they're they're putting those things on there. So those are a fix. And then you just have to, then I think they go up there by hand. Eventually, they're going to do it robotically, I'm sure, because that's
Right.
just too many to have a team going up there and methodically putting it on in there.
Right.
So they probably need to have some quality control that not only it goes up there and make sure it's in there, but it's able to really tell, yeah, it's snapped in and it's going to be good.
Awesome. Well, thank you for being available to do this live
My
stream.
pleasure. My pleasure. No,
I'm
I learned so much that I'm glad I had a chance to
Yeah,
actually ask Nick some questions.
I know. I'm so glad that he was able to hop on too. This was very impromptu, everyone, by the way. So I just kind of reached out and I was like, hey, this post has so many views and there's a lot of people interested in it. So my plan is to make a little bit of a deeper dive video and take clips from this, but I thought we should just do the interview live because, why not? Why not do
Yeah,
both?
and I got one last question for you, Ellie. I didn't get a chance to join your live stream yesterday where you were talking about what it was like to go into zero G.
Yes.
Any final thoughts?
Um, well, I'm glad it's over. So bad.
I,
It
I had
was
fun.
you had your Apple Vision Pro, which was nuts. Um, I guess my final thoughts were I really, it's a bummer that I got sick. I really wish that I could have enjoyed all 15 parabolas instead of really kind of only being able to do 6 and, then feeling really sick. So hopefully, I mean, I don't know if I'll ever get the opportunity again. And I admitted this, I wouldn't want to pay for it. I was thankful and fortunate to win a contest to do it, but it's expensive. And, already knowing how my body responds, if they need help researching motion sickness, I'd do it again, but it is not cheap.
Now,
So
what did you think of the first 3 parabolas where it was lunar gravity? You had absolutely no problem with that?
the lunar was pretty much fine. I mean, I
Yeah.
really was fine. And so I wish that, it could have been maybe 13 lunar and 2 zeros, but that's not going to
I,
sell.
I felt the same in that I, I learned more from the lunar gravity than the weight, because the weightlessness is you're just kind of expecting that. Yeah, you can be floating around. The lunar
Right.
gravity, I thought it would still feel like, gravity on Earth. And then you realize, wow, 1/6 gravity is almost like zero.
Yes.
We were so light and everything. And
Yeah.
and you could very easily go up and hit your head on the top, and you could imagine it would take a little while for an object to fall. So it was interesting. Plus, it's longer because it doesn't have to be zero. You get a little bit more out of
Right.
it. I agree. I would have enjoyed more of the lunar. And then all I have to do is figure out how to get that darn Apple Vision Pro to be able to not be able to track,
You're
because it got the
crazy.
motion sickness because it had the IMU, and the IMU suddenly just lost reference. But if they can
Yes.
crack it for lunar gravity, that will be cool, because they just put in that lunar landscape, and now you can walk around there and kind of feel like what it would really like to be hopping and something like that. So
Yeah.
yeah, that
Well,
would be my hope.
we do have a couple of happy birthdays, so thank you
Mhm.
all those of you who don't know, my birthday is on Sunday, March 24th, and I'm turning 32. So
32 on the 24th. Happy birthday, Ellie.
thank
Mhm.
you. It's crazy to, look back and realize I was in TV news for almost 10 years, and now it's like I'm a full-time content creator, and it's been a very interesting life so far. And so I thank everyone who is, enjoying the ride with me, and I have some really exciting stuff coming up, some big interviews that I'm trying to make happen. So just stay tuned.
Mhm.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for watching, and I'm glad you got to learn a little bit more about heat tiles.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Thank you, Ellie.
And thanks for coming on again. Thank you.